A Civil War letter written by Dr. J. M. Royce. The caption of Shays Artillery Battalion, Company B, Lavaca, Texas, January 4th, 1863. Major, I have the honor to respectfully submit the following report. In accordance with your Special Order Number 24, to destroy certain property at Indianola, designated in orders from headquarters at Houston and San Antonio, I proceeded with my detachment to Indianola, there being too low a tide to get the rafts afloat, which I found buried to the depth of 15 inches in sand. I had 2 rafts made of 130 railroads ties for the use of the batteries at Lavaca, and had them towed to this place by the schooner Exile with the assistance of 10 men of my detachment. Finding that the pile of railroad ties could not be fired without the greatest danger to the whole city of Indianola, I employed my detachment to flatten the pile for the purpose of diminishing the height of the flame. I reduced by this operation the height of the pile from 14 to 8 feet. I hesitated not on account of the value of the property to set it on fire, but a solid mass of, as near as I can learn, 750,000 feet of lumber, constituting a pile of about 300 feet in length, in some places 40, and in others 24 feet of depth and mostly 14 feet in height. All hard and well-seasoned Florida pine, with a strong southwest wind driving sparks and heat to the surrounding wooden buildings, some of which are not over 50 yards distant, and 2 stories high, which, if catching fire, would beyond a doubt have destroyed the whole town. After having flattened the pile down, I set lumber on fire against the wind at 4:00 p.m. on the 2nd instant, and with the assistance of citizens and soldiers, and favored by a rain which wetted the shingle roofs and weatherboards of the buildings, I succeeded to carry out your order without damage to the surrounding houses. The wharves had been set on fire the same day at 9:00 a.m. Your order to delay the destruction of the wharf at Indianola until further instructions, alas, has reached me too late to save such valuable property, the reconstruction of which will under the circumstances be so very difficult, and the loss of which will prove very likely the ruin of that town. The destruction had already gone too far. The warehouses, T-heads were entirely destroyed, and the whole length of the wharf, from 1.5 feet of water out, so injured that they are entirely useless. I, however, immediately commenced to extinguish the flames wherever I could reach them. The bridge of Powderhorn Bayou, at least 125 feet long, the railroad bridge, and the bridge of Stephen Bayou are entirely consumed by fire to the water's edge. I take this occasion to state that my detachment, everyone being citizens of Indianola, never faltered a moment to execute the orders of their superior officers, although ordered to destroy their own property. I further state that I took the responsibility to allow citizens to cut and split railroad ties, thereby making them useless to the enemy, and they're carrying them home for themselves and the families of soldiers as fuel, while I was at work to flatten the pile and make the aforesaid rafts. The amount of property destroyed cannot fall short of $150,000. I have the honor to be, very respectfully, your obedient servant, J. M. Royce, Captain Company B, Shays Artillery Battalion, to Major Dan D. Shay, commanding at Lavaca.
Abe J. Cotrette was a druggist in Itasca, Texas. He had once lived in Cuero, and on May 26, 1933, he granted an interview with a reporter from the Itasca Item recalling the Indianola disaster, the 1875 hurricane. He was a young man at the time of the flood and was one of the survivors in his parents' home when it was torn apart by the raging water and winds. He tells his story. The wind began to blow out of the east and continued for 4 days, gradually getting stronger until the flood, too terrible to ever be conceived, became a reality, and we were thrown on the mercy of the elements. My brother Theo was in the east side of town, which was separated by a bayou from the west side, helping some people prepare for the flood, when the wind reached the height of its power. He remained on the east side and was not injured by the flood. We began to move up into the attic of our home when the water started coming into the house, and when the wind blew the chimney off of the house, we saw a chance to go onto the roof if the occasion demanded, which it soon did. When the final blow came, the town was covered with about 8 feet of water. The wind reached the zenith of its power about 8 p.m., and only a short while before this I had watched a large 2-story house fall and go down into the water, carrying the occupants with it. Some of them escaped, but many did not. When our house began to fall, we climbed through the hole in the roof where the chimney had been. The roof was torn from our house by the wind and water and then turned over. I was successful in saving my mother, father, and sister the first time they fell off, but when it was turned over the second time, I was barely able to save myself. It was then that I became separated from my brother, Alois J. But by a trick of fate we were united in a short time. I could not find my mother, father, or sister, who were all pulled under the murky waters. Late that night my brother and I saw a boat that was loaded with wood near the opposite side of the bay, where the wind had carried us, and we immediately left the roof raft for the apparently beckoning boat. The next morning we found a piece of ham which we devoured without a moment's hesitation, as we were very hungry. When we finally managed to make it to land later that morning, we met the captain of the boat we had just vacated. He had left the boat for a better one when it began to sink. Charlie Walker was also on the boat where the captain had sought refuge. The four of us found a calf that had drowned, and we promptly began skinning it. We also found some potatoes which we cooked. The calf legs were roasted and the potatoes baked, which was our only food for the next 2 days. Assistance finally arrived after the end of 2 days in the personage of my brother and a party of friends, who, as I have already said, were in the east part of town. They were in search of people whom they could carry back to the mainland. When I got back to town, we organized a searching party. About 3 miles from Indianola, across the lake out on the bald prairie, I found the body of my mother. I never found my father or sister. My mother was buried in the Indianola cemetery. The people began to move out of Indianola, most of them going to Cuero. Memories of that storm, those terrible 4 days, and the search and finding of my mother's body were welded deep on my heart. The consolation of finding my mother's body was the turning point in my grief-stricken life. Hers was the only body of any of my relatives that was ever found, and my heart had to be placated. But each year as May rolls around, I begin to picture that flood in my mind. My thoughts wander back to my boyhood days in the then thriving coast city. Note: the Indianola reunion of the town survivors typically happened in the month of May. The annual reunion started in April 1930 with the formation of the Indianola Historical Society, with the first meeting being held in Cuero. The annual meetings then took place every year in Port Lavaca and continued into the 1940s.
The Night the Sea Swallowed Indianola, a story of survival and loss. As the winds picked up and the tides began to surge on that fateful August evening in 1886, the Shepherd family gathered inside their home in Indianola. Elizabeth Shepherd, the widow of Captain Henry Shepherd, was joined by her children, 16-year-old Henry and her married daughter Jenny Luther, who had come to visit from Corpus Christi with her 2 young sons, 2-year-old Shepherd and baby Willie, only 7 weeks old. Also seeking shelter in the home were family friends Mrs. Kate Hodges, wife of Dr. R. C. Hodges of Cuero, along with her 5-year-old twin boys, as well as Kate's sister, Mrs. L. M. Crocker of Austin. The storm arrived with fury, its winds howling louder as the hours dragged on. Rain lashed the windows, and the waters steadily rose, creeping ominously into the house. Young Henry, though just a teenager, displayed remarkable bravery. As the storm escalated, he worked tirelessly to comfort the others, assuring them they would endure the night. But when the water reached their knees, the situation turned dire. Henry led the group into his mother's bedroom, a small, detached structure he hoped would provide a safer refuge. It wasn't long before the monstrous waves and relentless wind ripped the room from its foundation. With a deafening roar, the waters engulfed the house and the people within it. In the chaos, Henry found himself trapped under the collapsed roof, the weight pinning him beneath the rising waters. With sheer determination, he struggled to free himself, his hands grasping frantically in the dark until he felt another arm. Pulling with all his might, he broke through the surface and realized he had grabbed his sister Jenny. The two clung to a section of the floating roof as the storm tossed them violently. Exhausted and battered, both had swallowed significant amounts of water. Jenny was grief-stricken. The waves had ripped her infant son, Willie, from her arms. Her older son, Shepherd, had also been swept away. Their cries for help were lost in the deafening roar of the storm. For over an hour, Henry and Jenny clung to their makeshift raft as the waters carried them a mile inland. Finally, the storm relented, and they washed ashore on the mainland. Jenny was too weak to move, her body drained of all strength. Young Henry, refusing to give up, went in search of help. Nearby, he found a man named Smith, who assisted in bringing Jenny to safety and eventually back to the ruins of Indianola. The storm had left unimaginable destruction in its wake. Families were shattered, lives lost, and Indianola reduced to little more than debris scattered across the coast. Among the casualties were Jenny's 2 sons and the others who had sought refuge in the shepherd home that night. In the aftermath, Henry and Jenny made their way to Cuero, where their sister Lizzie Bates and her husband, Frank, took them in. The Bates family provided a new beginning, though the scars of that night would remain with them forever. Henry and Jenny lived the rest of their lives in Cuero, their story of survival etched into the community's memory. Today, the house they called home after the storm stands as the DeWitt County Historical Museum, a solemn reminder of the resilience and tragedy that shaped the region. The memory of the Shepherd family's harrowing ordeal lives on, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure even in the face of nature's greatest fury.
Where is my home? Written by Elizabeth H. Jordan after the storm of Indianola. I left the dusty, bustling mart in summer's sultry hours, and sought my cottage house apart, midst vines and cedar bowers. The birds were warbling in the grove, the children on the green, and all was joy and all was love. In that bright happy scene, from this loved spot no more I'll roam. Here I will live and die, and only change my happy home for a lasting one on high. Presumptions wouldst thou dare dispose? Low, erring, feeble, vain. E'en then the whirling cyclone rose o'er city, sea, and plain. The winds approach with maddening. Ships, houses, trees all gone. The furious billows bash the shore to drive destruction on. Twice was the struggle there with death. Life, life, is each one's thought. 'Twas given with the Almighty's breath, and now all else is naught. A noble youth was swept along in that tempestuous hour. His heart was bold, his hand was strong, with more than manhood's power. O Father, listen to my prayer. Before thy throne I bow. The widow trusted to my care. O spare those orphans now. The raft sped on midst gloom and roar, and neared a vessel's side. O God, our trials now are o'er. We're saved, the mother cried. And now an aged man pressed on, 3 females in his care. His back was frail, his faith was strong, that God would hear their prayers. With fearful speed, on they fly, when midst the tempests soar, and breakers dashing wild and high, they're cast from the shore. Brave men awaiting on the land, their prompt assistance gave, with Christian hearts and willing hands, the exhausted crew to save. And battling now amid the roar of winds and waves so wild, a calf bears on and to the shore a sweet confiding child. Dear mother, said an infant girl, cease thus to moan and cry. To God, who sent this fearful whirl, we'll raise our prayers on high. We love our Maker, mother dear, and on his name we'll call. Our feeble accents he will hear. He loves his creatures all. And now a house is drifting on, full of human freight. Their last support on earth is gone. Oh, what must be their fate? Mothers are there with children all, and sires with trembling hand. They cannot choose, cannot save all of that devoted band. Now one by one they're passing through the billows and the gloom. Darkness hides their fate from view, but screams announce their doom. Hark, groans of fear and pain arise. Wild prayers are shrieked on high. O Father, listen to their cries, and let the storm pass by. 'Tis done, but lo! The works of art. Man's pride, his wealth and power. The debris of his busy heart. All scattered in an hour. All churches mingle in their fall. No creed divides them there. The gay saloon, the dancing hall. Alike in ruin share. Their homes of love and lofty domes are scattered for all time. And there the inmates of these homes lie cold in mud and slime. Their infants found a watery bed. Means strength and beauty's flower. The high, the wise, the reverend herd bowed to the conqueror's power. Where is my home, my happy home? I asked in wild despair. I asked again, where is my home? And echo answered, where?